Hello and welcome to a discussion on the topic religious violence. You see, we often wonder why religious symbols are sometimes associated with acts of violence, and then we find that one of the main reasons behind it is that religion is exploited by those people who are violent in nature. Now, although this explanation of religion being an innocent victim of the darker forces of human nature is exaggerated, it cannot be denied that it does contain some amount of truth. You see, religion is often exploited to suit personal agendas, and it's important to understand why is it so. Why people who are involved in potentially violent struggles often resort to religion. For example, if we consider the case of Sikhs, this means asking why people facing economic, social and political issues turned to preachers like General Singh Bhindranwale for leadership and guidance. Speaking of Bhindranwale primarily attracted the Jats with a peasant background who were largely unhappy with the profits earned out of the Green Revolution being garnered by large landowners. What was seen is that it was the Sikh businessmen and political leaders who were mainly occupied with these issues and were in support of Bhindranwale at least early on. Talking about the political demands of the Sikhs, there was the demand for Khalistan, a separate Sikh nation, but interestingly Bhindranwale himself never quite rightly supported Khalistan. Whatever his own reservations about the Khalistan issue didn't interfere with his appeal to sacrifice, which made his rhetoric appealing to the separatists. Besides, it also created a platform for a potentially more powerful aspect of the sanctification of political demands. You see, by identifying a secular social struggle with the cosmic struggle of order and disorder, truth and evil, political actors have often justified the use of violence. Usually, it is only the state that has the moral right to take life, be it for military defense or police protection or punishment and the like. Almost all religious traditions, including the Sikh traditions, favors non-violence and prohibits the murder of humans. Here, in this context, Bhindranwale has said it is a great sin to keep weapons and kill anyone. But then, speaking of extraordinary situations, he further adds that it is an even greater sin to have weapons and not to seek justice. Many other religious leaders of various faiths may agree with Bhindranwale on this point. The rule against killing may be reversed in those circumstances where social or spiritual justice is at stake. Let me now specifically talk about war. Well, war provides a reason to be violent, and for those who want to use the force of violence which is morally permitted but do not have the official approval by the government and find it beneficial to turn to religion as the meta-morality that it provides and justifies their activities on religious grounds. By upraising an earthly struggle to the level of the cosmic, they can avoid the usual ethical restrictions on killing. If their struggle includes an enormous battle of the spirit, then it is not morals but the rules of war that apply. No, see, the Parties in a religious war claim to have much more loyalty to their sides than those parties in a purely political war. Their interests can include national interests. Having said that, you might now note that the best known incidents of religious violence throughout contemporary world have taken place in these places where the character of a nation state cannot be clearly defined. Palestine and Ireland are clear examples, but the revolution in Iran also involved itself with what the state should be like and what elements of society should lead it. So, what we find is religion has provided the basis for a new kind of leadership and for a new definition of a nation. If we talk about our own country, India, then we will find that aspects of social revolution exist in the Indian state of Punjab as well. Surprisingly, it is not the well-known leaders of the Akali party who have resorted to violence, but the younger, reserved and marginal group who consider the use of violence to be extremely authorizing and empowering. The radical youth have been established their own courts and government offices, as has been evinced by many instances. These young Sikh extremists, by draping their actions in the apparel of religion, have offered their actions a legal validity and thus fundamentally political actions. By asserting their right to kill in their own hands, the committers of religious violence are putting forward a bold claim of political independence. Bhindranwale often spoke of the Sikhs' separate identity as that of a religious community with national characteristics. Although he was not an open supporter of Khalistan, his speeches clarify that differences and rivalries within the Sikh community were among his main concerns. Some of his bitter words were pointing at Sikhs who he believed showed weakness and an inclination to make easy compromises. Actually, being a preacher of unity, Bhindranwale was in favor of all uniting around him and conforming to the norms of Sikh belief and behavior and common community sentiments. Now, who were his actual supporters then? His supporters were Sikhs who were socially marginal to the community, including those belonging to the lower castes and those who resided abroad. Thus, a large sum of money and moral support for the Punjab militants came from Sikhs dwelling in faraway places like London, Houston and Los Angeles. So, the Sikhs gained a certain sense of positiveness with their identification with Bhindranwale. The Sikh communities in England, Canada and America were emotional to his message that the Sikhs had to be strong, united and defensive of their tradition. This is how Bhindranwale was encouraging a form of political revolution not only by gaining popular support in Punjab but in abroad as well. Often his message was questionably taken as a sanction of the killings that some of the fundamentalist youth committed. You might wonder, when does cosmic struggle leads to real violence? See the waves of religious violence of the militant Sikhism could be that of the Palestinian Shiites Muslims, Irish Catholics or militant Christian fundamentalism in the United States. There are of course many exceptional communities which display the true color of cosmic struggles as acts of violence, but those occupied in them, say like the Sikh activists, would be enraged if we drew an inference stating that their actions were merely for socio-political advantages. The argument put forth is that they act out of the religious conviction, and this is legitimate up to a certain extent only. Victory over the evil is a fragment of religious logic, and virtually each and every religious community carried with itself the impression of chaos and terror. Note that in every occasion symbolic violence does not open up to bloodshed, and even the yearning of political leaders to utilize religious signs is not ample to change religion to a violent ending. The fact remains that at times religion shows instances of driving the dedicated more effortlessly into militant confrontation at times compared to other times, and thus the question remains when and why. So, religious revival is not merely defined by the growth of fundamentalism or to strict conformity to a specific set of rituals and doctrines. It occurs through a series of renewed rituals and practices in both the public and private spheres, and demographics are further fortifying this trend. At present, resurgence of religious violence globally has emphasized on the need to answer the questions that have cropped and also to trace the features that result in violence. Social scientists have primarily focused on the socio-political surface, although some have tried to find out the actual logic of religion and its hues. For instance, David Rapoport identified several trends of Messianic movements which have been numerous and episodic. If a Messianic believer thinks that he must participate in a struggle to force the end, the nature of the Messianic aspiration itself or the cause will become a factor conducive to terror. So, see, features of religion as hinted at have been extracted directly from his understanding of the religious expression of cosmic struggle as from what had happened in the Sikh tradition. But it is to be noted that the various tenets of religious commitment could be seen wherever religious violence have fallen out. See, if we presume that religion leads to violence, or that the tussle between the order and chaos, good and evil, evolves from history in an actual geographical location among social competitors, it is probable that those susceptible to violence will turn to religion as the main ideological support. The mythical battles in the epics of Hindu tradition, like in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, have often been used as metaphors while speaking of struggles today. So, have the battles of biblical Judaism and Christianity and Sikh and Islamic history similar to Hindus, Muslims and Christian politicians are keen on creating allusions to literary and religious tradition amidst their speeches, where they draw a parallel between their worldly foes to enemies spoken of in legendary battles. What is often remarked is that Hindu politicians only retell mythological tales rather than non-fictitious historical events. However, one may state that the boundary between history and myth is blurred. But look, history is an indispensable part of the Hindu consciousness than Christians or others suppose. The significant time cycles empower cosmic destructions in the world with the culmination of the Dark Age in existence, and for such reasons the Hindu tradition is approved of as one of the historical religions and does not lack reflections of worldly struggles and their divine intervention, unlike what Oriental writers sometimes entail. Here, let me talk about an exception. See, a very important tradition which appears to be absent of the notion of cosmic struggle is Buddhism. This religion is an exception as it holds no records of violence sanctioned by religion. However, in Thai history, there are justifications for Buddhist warfare and religious elements, citing that they could be present in today's conflicts of Buddhist movements in Sri Lanka. Thai case would then be an exception to the whole tradition. If this is true, but generally speaking, there is practically no need of battles in Buddhism for the pious to prove their prowess. The declaration given by Buddhist tradition about spiritual conflict is the contradiction of the two understandings. One holds that the flawed and illusory world is legitimate, and the other is a rather higher appreciation, leaping over the worldly notion by and large. And the justification of the conflict that occurs in the world is given in such as it basically emanates in the human minds. This particular manifestation of the cosmic conflict, instead of being violent, leads to peace and also makes the Buddhist unconvincing towards violence. Similarly, according to many Sufi Muslims, the actual jihad is the dualism of good and evil present in oneself and the continuous struggle between them, rather than being present in day-to-day rivalry and friction. See, the concept of cosmic battles differs to a large extent from the concept of historical battle, but it goes hand in hand with Sikh theology. In this context, Bhindranwale explained that it is the people who are weak and are the miscreants only. Neither internal insufficiency nor external occurrence of violence can alone initiate the cosmic struggle. It is believed to be associated with the earthly violence. One who believes that the struggle is caused by social forces can never identify himself with the struggle. Again, one who believes that the conflict is completely within him will never search for it outside in the society. The actual violence occurs when both of these situations synchronize. Not only in the tradition of Sikhism but also in Christianity, Judaism and Islam, one can find that there is an association between the external and the internal areas of cosmic struggle. For example, if we are to speak of Christianity, it can be found that many Christians turned into atrocious anti-Semitists. When an individual bears the responsibility for the execution of Jesus, it is an impression of good Christian loyalty. But there are Christians who take part in denial of Jesus. According to the belief of some Christians, the foes to whom Jesus was delivered were Jews. So the present day intrusion on the Jewish community acts as a matchstick to illume their fill of accountability. I will now speak about where the cosmic struggle still continues in the present day world. You see, the belief that the sacred struggle still continues in some different forms today acts as the spiritual defense of the Sikhs, Shiites and anti-Semitic Christians' actions. This principle also startles the members of Gush Emunim. Gush Emunim is an Israeli Messianic and right-wing activist movement which aims to establish Jewish settlements in the West Bank, the Gaza Strips and the Golan Heights. This movement has achieved Israel's victory in the Six-Day War, which embodies the fact that the era of militant redemption has already started. For the uninformed, the Six-Day War, also known as the June War, 1967 Arab-Israeli War or Third Arab-Israeli War, was fought between 5th and 10th June in the year 1967 by Israel and the neighboring states of Egypt, known at that time as the United Arab Republic, Jordan and Syria. Not the whole Israel community engaged themselves in the movement with the same amount of devotion and dedication. Likewise, not all the Christians, Muslims and Shiites were satisfied with the fact the prophetic struggles of their tradition is really accessible. There are many of the trusting concurrence to this notion within which the struggle remains, for which the person of belief did not feel the inner strain between conviction and incredulity, assertion and rejection, regulation and anarchy, but they sometimes trusted the fact that the contradiction directly outbursts on a social plane in case when the social world seems to be scientific and likable. What Bhindranwale did was to turn the objection into one of the principal aspects of his ministry. He believed and stressed that it is very much necessary to aware people about their oppressed conditions. In fact, to him, the display of regular social order lies in the fact that how successfully the wicked forces hide their satanic plans. Through this very logic, somehow he was led to believe that even without any proper indication of the truth, the Punjabi society was wrenched into a great struggle. See, at times Bhindranwale regarded that the efforts of few of the dedicated Sikhs had been doomed, proclaiming that the Sikh community was witnessing a threat. On the other hand, he was also hopeful of its betterment. So the interesting part here about the earth-shaking rhetoric is the unpredictability. Had the outcome been predictable, there would be very little scope for violent actions. Knowing that the foe could win, there would not be grounds to fight back. Here let me speak of Western Barre, who has described the dreadful circumstances revolving around the ghost dance religion of plain Indians. Preconceiving the defeat, the tribe diverted its approach from worldly to spiritual conflict, entertaining a perspective of a ritual dance that could conjure spiritual force for knocking down their opponent alien cavalry. I just stated a couple of minutes ago about Barre's discussion on the ghost dance religion. You see, Barre opined that it was utmost desperation which forced people to turn towards religion. Again, in the same context, it could be stated that had they known of a victory without struggle, there wouldn't have been a need for any form of engagement. Like William James has spoken of healthy-minded religion, which is nothing but passive pacifism. Many mainstream Protestant churches have claimed that social progress is inescapable, while at the same time there are other pacifists who have been involved in conflict directly. The best resemblance of pacifist leaders who at times narrowly moved about the edges of violence were Mohandas Gandhi and Menno Simons. Simons was an Anabaptist after whom the Mennonite Church has been named. Both Gandhi and Simons have maintained that without human endeavor, the desired outcome could never be attained. It is worth mentioning here that Bhindranwale and Gandhi were quite similar in their outlooks, as both observed the world with reference to cosmic struggle, and both held their cause as set on a subtle balance of opportunity and oppression, assuming that human actions could alter scales. Yet it is to be noted that what distinguishes the two was nothing but violence. You see, the human deaths in the Sikh cause cannot be termed as pacifist, because Bhindranwale declared that there could not be deliverance without a weapon. Yet he was careful to mention that these weapons could not be used indiscriminately. It is a sin among the Sikhs to use weapons to hurt the innocent, but there is also no greater sin than possessing weapons and not putting it to use to protect their faith. Thus, Bhindranwale too was armed, though never for once did he openly confess. He strongly opined that those who executed religiously prescribed violence deserved to be honored, and often referring to himself as the humble servant and an uneducated, fallible person, Bhindranwale transparently shared a part of the more moderate Akali leader Longwal's modus operandi, as well as his political constituency, and chose to be guided by Baba Deep Singh, one of the most revered martyrs of Sikh history. Likewise, Bhindranwale thought of himself as destined to martyrdom. To a great number of his followers, Bhindranwale thus achieved a heroic martyrdom, and presently one simply does not hear of Bhindranwale in any terms any other than Santji. Whatever the manner in which he may have appeared to the media and the Indian government all through his life has been excused, as one unarguably forgives a heroic soldier of a glorious war. Moreover, his words and deeds clearly evoked a deep sense of response among many Sikhs. In conclusion, it can be said that it may resemble a horrifying contradiction that some of the most saintly individuals are those who encourage the activists of religious violence. However, it is to be interpreted as those who strive for religion perceive them as an ethical battle for the good, and their targets are ultimately seen as conducive to peace, even if that entails some amount of bloodshed. On the contrary, all religiously faithful individuals might not recognize the same struggle of divine proportions, and their motive is to waken folks, mobilize the community, fight evil forces and demonstrate in a melodramatic manner that there are thousands of others ready to give their lives on his side and deliver the divine judgment of death. The real essence of cosmic struggle lies in the fact that order will be victorious over chaos. But the irony remains in the fact that innumerable individuals ought to die for unquestioned visions for such kind of victory to prevail. With this, we come to an end of the discussion on the topic religious violence. We will meet again in some other discussion on some other module. Thank you.